Guys, I'm happy to introduce to you my new car. I have been a Mini enthusiast for a really long time, but I've never owned a supercharged R53 Mini Cooper S. And well, I thought moving back to North Carolina, back at the track, if you haven't seen where our day-to-day office is, watch one of our previous videos. I was thinking, how cool would it be to do a sort of maybe cheap, fun, enthusiast manual transmission track build? And well, I think, or at least I thought, I found the perfect car. So I bought this 2005 Mini Cooper S with just over 100,000 miles on it for $3,000 from one of my best friends. And in this video, I'm going to tell you all about it and why it's a complete disaster. All right, guys, before we get into why it's a complete disaster, and this did not go to plan, and it's really just not the way I wanted to start this YouTube channel covering more combustion cars. Yes, I post on this channel from time to time, but primarily my day-to-day job is filming new transportation, electric cars, driver assistance stuff for our out-of-spec network of channels. This is where I thought it would be fun to get some BMWs and Minis and Porsches and some other stuff and enthusiast cars. And we've got a racetrack to play around with. Let's build some race cars, or at least enthusiast cars. And I thought, well, let's do it on the cheap. And since I'm a Mini guy, I thought, okay, great. Let me start looking for Mini Cooper S's. And for the last 2 or 3 months, I've been browsing Cars and Bids and Facebook Marketplace. And I've made a few offers here and there, but nothing really solidified. And one of my best friends, Ben, who's been on this channel and our other channels from time to time, works at the local Porsche dealer here in the Raleigh, North Carolina area. And one of his customers traded in this R53 Mini Cooper S, 2005, just over 100,000 miles. You know, it's a little bit of definitely sat outside, but it's a relatively clean car. Nice silver on white roof. Always love having a white roof in the Minis. Door. Let's see what's going on there. Let me see. Why are we locked? Let's click unlock. Is this the right car? Yes, it is the right car. There we go. Cool car, you know, dual exhaust, little spoiler action. It's got the correct wheels, I think, from the time period. I definitely unlocked it, but this door doesn't want to unlock. I want to show you the interior really quick. Let me reach over and open that door for you. There we go. Maybe you can pull it open. Nice. Look at the inside. It's got the blue leather seats. Driver seats a little bit worse for wear, but you know, I was thinking, okay, we could swap in a race seat, and Ben already had this Mini, so I was like, just going by his work the other day, stopped in to just take it for a little drive around the block. And it's been a while since I've driven a supercharged R53 Mini. It has the W11 engine in it. And, you know, just over 100,000 miles. These things are actually fairly reliable. Not this particular one. And I will explain that in a second. And, you know, I took it for a drive around the Cary, North Carolina area, ripped it up and down the street, wide open, 6,500, almost 7,000 RPM, sounding great, rolling through the gears. And I told Ben, you know what? I'm going to take this one home. He had his Rivian over there. I'm going to steal this. Let me just drive it for a little bit. And, you know, I basically told Ben, I'll buy it from you. And we hadn't agreed on a number, but we kind of came to around $3,500, as that's a very reasonable price, I thought, for a running and driving Mini Cooper S. He bought this thing for, I think, around $2,000 or $2,500 off trade. He put new tires on it and potentially a few other things, I'm not sure. But I'm sure he didn't lose much money on it, but he certainly didn't make much money on it doing the transaction. We're talking low dollar. I felt really good about it. So the next day I go to take this thing to Starbucks, and even driving it home after the test drive, I didn't notice anything weird with it on the test drive with Ben. Ben didn't indicate to me there was anything weird with it. The only thing he mentioned was one of the wheel speed sensors was going out, so it triggered an ABS or traction control light, which is normal on these. That's like a $30 part. The AC was blowing cold only on the passenger side, not the driver's side. Again, a very common R53 issue where you just kind of need to top up the Freon. And, you know, my original plan was to take this car for a drive with you guys. And then one of the reasons I wanted to do a BMW or Mini is because we're here at G3 Automotive in Raleigh, North Carolina. My good friend Chris owns this shop, and I thought, how cool would it be to do some BMWs and Minis? Actually, this black car right here was on my list and still is on my list, an E60 M5 V10 powered super sedan, very much in the market for one of those in the near future, and some other builds and different generations. I'm a huge BMW guy, a huge Mini guy, and I want to get back into it. And so having Chris here locally to work on our cars, sort of as a BMW expert mechanic, I felt confident that it's time to start getting some cars, and maybe it'll be great. That was my intention, or maybe it would be terrible. In this case, it turned out terrible. So I took it on the test drive with Ben, didn't notice anything. On the drive home, I started to hear some clanking noises coming from the front of the car, and I thought, oh, probably needs a timing chain. What's very common on these Minis around this time period is the timing chain will stretch and you'll hear what's called the death rattle. Usually it could just be a little bit low on oil, or something with the tensioner isn't putting enough tension on the chain. And I thought, well, that's kind of a pain. It's not cheap, but whatever, I feel okay about that. We'll just need to do a timing chain. So I started it up the next morning, didn't really notice much change. I talked to Mike, who's Ben's partner, about this car and the timing chain noise on my way home, actually, after the test drive. And I said, Mike, do you ever hear that timing chain noise? He's like, yeah, a couple times I've driven it, I've heard it, but it hasn't really gotten worse. I thought, okay, sounds like timing chain, good to go. Started up the next day, take it to Starbucks and back. Didn't really notice too much until I was halfway, grabbed my Starbucks on my way home, and the noises started getting worse, and the noises got really bad. And actually, as I was pulling on the street, heading back home, I felt and heard a really loud squeak from the engine, and I actually felt it bog down, like there was an internal resistance. Instantly, I put it in neutral, shut it off, and I was close enough to my house to actually coast it into my driveway. And that was the moment I knew it wasn't just timing chain, or it could have skipped a gear on the timing if the chain was really loose, but it wasn't making that much noise. That's when I thought, oh, it might need a new engine, because it sounded like rod bearing and not timing chain. And I drove this car about 10 to 12 miles before that noise happened after purchasing it. Technically, I hadn't even paid Ben for it at the time, but that is the way things go. So I took it over here to G3 Automotive, and I'm going to insert some clips. And Chris was like, oh, not only did I take it here, I had to have it towed here from my house. And now it's pretty much fried. So I need to figure out what the heck we're going to do with it to go forwards. All right, guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play you the clip of what the Mini sounded like when it arrived to G3. They started it up, ran it, and just did some initial diagnosis. When I was driving the car, it really did sound like timing chain, because I'd go down the highway and at, medium throttle, I could hear a little bit of clicking and clanking happening. And then at hard throttle, it would kind of clear and then it would come back. And I thought, well, maybe it was just the tensioner that was getting oil pressure or not. Turns out it was much, much worse than just a timing chain. But listen to what it sounded like when it arrived to G3. So you can see this thing sounded absolutely terrible. Knocking away. That is just straight rod knock. Not good noise. Really bad. Now, let's talk about how that could have happened. You remember earlier on, I talked to Mike about it, and Mike is a really big car enthusiast and knows what to listen for, really. Ben says he never heard the noise. Mike says he noticed a clicking and clanking noise when he would drive the car around. By the way, I'm not putting any blame on them. I bought the car. It is totally fine from my position. I'm just trying to gauge how long this was going on for. And Mike said he would hear a little bit of clanking and something coming from the engine, but you don't know if it's, again, timing chain or engine mounts or whatever, and it was probably much less pronounced than it was here in this clip. And it turns out Chris said the thing was bone dry on oil. Absolutely nothing in there. And I'm trying to figure out how Ben would let a car go bone dry on oil, because he's a car enthusiast. He would know to check the oil. Well, the first issue was the dipstick was broken in half, so you couldn't actually check the oil on this car because the dipstick was gone. But the indication from Ben, actually, this is really interesting. When Ben bought the car, the Carfax actually said it had just had a recent service. And Ben only bought the car 6 months ago, 5 months ago, something like that, maybe even less. And so on the Carfax, it says dipstick replaced, oil change happened, another service, like 4 or 5 things were done according to the Carfax. Now that's interesting because that service was claimed to have been done at G3 Automotive, which is where we are. So I asked Chris about this and I said, hey, can you pull up your records internally? Because the car says it just had an oil change according to Carfax. That's what Ben was going off of. And it's reported to Carfax that it had an oil change. Why is it out of oil in less than 1,000 miles? Like, unless it's pluming white smoke or has a really big drip, there's no way it's out of oil. In less than 1,000 miles in just a few months, you would have to notice a major leak. And Chris actually pulled up the previous, service documentation on the car. And it shows that the previous owner brought it into G3. G3 recommended an oil dipstick change and an oil change and blah, 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 blah service. And the previous customer declined everything and just traded it in, I imagine, to Ben's dealership, to the Porsche dealership. And so weirdly, that recommendation, but declined by the client, ended up on the Carfax as the service actually being done. So here, Ben bought this car thinking, hey, it's recently serviced, it's good to go. Turns out that was not the case. You cannot trust Carfax completely. And it was just recommended service that looked like it had been done. And that's why you've always got to do a PPI, even on cheap cars. You've always got to double check the work. I think Ben and I both learned a lesson here. Don't trust the Carfax in every situation. I'm not sure how it could have ended up on the Carfax like that. Certainly it was nothing malicious on Chris's part or G3. It's just so funny how full circle this has come, where the shop that's working on the car recommended service to the previous owner, which they declined, but then looked like it was done on Carfax. So Ben bought the car thinking it was dialed in, which then he sold it to me in good faith. And I just happened to be the guy that bought it. And 10 to 12 miles into my ownership, it just blows up and completely, is inoperable anymore. So Chris added 5 quarts of oil to the Mini. An insane amount of oil. I mean, it was bone dry, which is exactly why the rods are gone. But listen to what it sounds like after 5 quarts of oil. It made no difference. And I'll show you what it looks like when he opened up the engine after you listen to this clip. It does not sound good. So you can see after 5 quarts of oil, clearly this thing is going to need a significant amount of rebuilding because the scoring on the rods and the bearings have got to be terrible. And that is exactly the case. I'm going to throw up a few photos for you guys to see here, but you can see the amount of metal that's in the bottom of the oil pan. That's been circulating through the engine. This thing is toast. And then you can also just see the rods are broken apart. Here's a little video clip of them just looking completely mutilated. And that is the end of the engine as we know it. Yes, if it was a really significantly rare engine that was a race motor or something special, you might be able to rebuild it, doing a top to bottom complete rebuild. For a Mini like this, it is just not worth going through the heartache and trouble of trying to restore the original motor in this car. This motor is junk. It will never run again. It will never be seen in a car again. And we need to source a other powertrain for this car. I'm going to talk about that in the next clip a little bit. Again, Ben is one of my closest friends. He would not sell me a car knowing it was going to blow up. This is just a series of misfortunate events. I happen to be the guy that it blew up on, and you get to go through it with me. At the end of the day, it sucks, yes, because now I'm out a lot of money that I have to fix the car, but I told Ben I would buy the car. I have the title for the car right here. And, sometimes you just take an L in life, and we're not talking major dollars here. We're talking a few grand. It's not life-changing. It's not great, but don't blame Ben at all. I test drove the car. I could have done more due diligence. I did not. and it just happened to blow up basically right after the test drive. Oh well, so you win some, you lose some. Lost hard on this one. Let me play the rest of the video for you where we can discuss repair options, or even if we should repair it. You know, this is not the way I wanted to start this series. My intention with this car for the Kyle Connor YouTube channel video was to build like a $5,000 Mini. I spent, you know, $3,500 on the car was my plan. Ben actually took $500 off when he heard about my engine troubles. So I spent $3,000 on the car, and I really was thinking we would just do a little bit of maintenance, maybe find a sponsor. One of our sponsors, Max Speeding Rides, actually makes coilover suspension for this, and I was like, well, maybe we'd throw their suspension on it, do a little pad and fluid for the brakes, and we'd have ourselves a cheap and cheerful little car to bomb around the track and have some fun with a manual transmission. Those plans have sailed. This is no longer a cheap and cheerful build. We need to decide, do we abandon the Mini? And basically I've spent, you know, $3,000 on a blown engine car at this point, which is really a shame. Or do we rebuild? And there are a few options moving forward. The first is we can get a junkyard motor for it. Somewhere in the $1,000 to $1,500 range, probably closer to $1,500, we can get a junkyard, used, probably high mileage engine that we would swap in here. It's really not that bad. It's really not that expensive. However, we would be taking a massive gamble. And again, that's just on the part, not on the labor. Let's say it's another $1,000 or $1,500 to install it. So we're basically $3,000 installed. We'd have a, you know, junkyard motor that's questionable history. Does it need a timing chain? Was it run out of oil like the last one? Are we going to have spun rod bearings? The questions go on. And, you know, that's one option, find a used engine to put in here, which I think at minimum we should do. Then, of course, I could step up to, you know, finding a known used engine, which Chris actually has one here. Chris, in inventory, has a W11 that was modified and improved and has new bearings, a new head with that's been machined and opened up to get a little bit more airflow in here. These cars are notorious for being choked on airflow. It can easily have a supercharger reduction pulley, maybe a 15 or even up to a 19% reduction pulley. And then, you know, that's about $5,000 installed in the car, which we're talking serious money now because I'm into this car for $7 grand. But then we'd have a healthy running and driving, really cool, probably reliable Mini Cooper S for a long time for just a couple $1,000s more than a junkyard motor. That's kind of how I'm leaning. Again, we were not planning on going into this project needing to spend this much money. I was thinking just a little bit of service and maintenance and we'd have ourselves a fun mini build, but that, like I said, that ship has sailed. So I might go with that route. That kind of feels the right way. And then we could go all the way and have a full race motor built for it, which would be in the $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 range, maybe just for the engine alone, which I'm not going to do. I'm not prepared to spend that much money on what was intentionally going to be a cheap and cheerful track, you know, car. So I think going with the used motor that's already here, Chris is going to hook me up with a good deal at G3 Automotive. He's going to install it. And then we get into the while you're in theirs. And I'm going to do a video here next week. You'll see an update on here. Chris and I will run through the options, but we're going to throw this car on a lift and we need to decide what are we going to do for the while you're in theirs. Potentially a new clutch. Again, when the engine's out, everything becomes so much cheaper to upgrade that it might be worth spending a little bit more money now with the project. That just makes it way nicer, way easier down the road to have all of the upgrades done. So that means cooling systems. Chris is going to transfer this supercharger over to his engine that he's going to be selling me, and we're going to do the big supercharger service while it's out if we go that route. You know, that's basically an oil change on the supercharger, pulley reduction, things like that. We need to think about clutch. We need to think about limited slip differential. We need to think about exhaust. Do we go catless downpipe? Again, this car's not really going to be driven on the street. It is primarily going to be used for the track. We're not doing a high horsepower build here. What we're looking for is something with a little bit more kick than stock, but that is just reliable to be run at high RPM and wide open throttle day after day. When friends come into town, they can jump in this and rip it around our track. So I think that's the route I'm leaning towards going. Of course, it's quite unfortunate that I only got such a small, basically 1.5 drives of enjoyment out of this car before it blew up, and it just makes for an interesting story, I guess. The whole idea was a total disaster here, and I wish I could be out there driving the car with you. Instead, I'm in the back of a parking lot filled with broken BMWs and Minis. But that is the case with this particular one. I really think I'm leaning towards going with the used engine that's been slightly upgraded. It's a known engine that is going to work. Chris can also give me a warranty on that engine, which I feel very confident about, and Chris will always stand behind his work. I love working with G3 Automotive. He's actually, we've worked on Minis together. He's worked on my cars for years. And now that I'm back in North Carolina, I feel really good about having Chris and his team do all the work here. A little bit of headlight restoration, a light wash really is all it needs. Maybe just a cheap Sparco or OMP driver and passenger seat. We don't need to go crazy, just cheap, on the cheap mods, cheap coilovers, cheap whatever. And then we'd have ourselves just a fun little track rat to rip around in. So this is my new car. It has a blown engine. It's unfortunate, it's sad, yes. Hopefully it will make some interesting videos for you, but it is not the video I wanted to make. It's not the video style I wanted to make it in. I wanted to be having a big fat burnout introducing the car to you, and with, sort of saying if this video does well, maybe we can do some other projects down the line. But man, is it starting out rough, needing thousands of dollars of repairs in a car that really isn't even worth it. And it's hard to justify, in full transparency, it's hard to justify putting money into this project for YouTube when this channel is still so small and in its infancy. I know it can get big. We've done it on Out of Spec. We know how YouTube works. We know you guys love to see horror stories and disaster stories and positive outcomes from them. So the formula is here, but it still hurts because, man, I envisioned such a fun series of videos and it's already broken. We can't even drive it. And now we need to upgrade it. And I was kind of thinking, let's do a stock, get the lap times of the stock Mini, do some light upgrades, do some big builds. But now that the engine's got to come out and get junked anyway, we may as well just do it all right up front and maybe save some ideas for another build. There is another car here before we end the video. By the way, this is a diesel swapped wagon that Chris built with I think this has the 6-cylinder diesel in it. This is a really cool car. Perhaps I'll do a video on that one. Really nice build. There is another car back over here that is of interest to me, potentially for another series. If you guys like this Mini enough, and if the videos do okay enough on this Mini, I might either trade this Mini in on another one, or we'll do this one regardless. This is essentially underneath this cover, a John Cooper Works with some stupid aftermarket headlights that were supposed to be like F56 generation headlights. We'd have to change those out. This is a fully built, and I mean forged everything, turned up to 11, big brakes, nice wheels, the whole bit, hardcore suspension. This is like making over 300 horsepower to the wheels, racing clutch, everything. Mini John Cooper Works Clubman, because you can see it's the long one. Come on back here. It's got the third door. I don't know who or why they went so hardcore, whoever built this car with a Clubman, but it's actually really nicely done. There's a ton of money in this car. And Chris built this vehicle a few years ago for one of his clients. Somehow it ended up here, and it's been sitting here for a couple years. So Chris thought it would be fun for us to maybe go in together and do a video series on this car. It probably just needs a little bit of refurbishing to bring it back to life. We could probably do it on the cheap, because again, Chris kind of just wants it out of his parking lot, and you can't just sell a car that's this fully built to anyone on the internet. He was like, man, this would be kind of a cool track car to do. JCW Clubman. I've always wanted a Clubman JCW, and it's got the correct bumper, and the exhaust pipes look amazing down there. And again, we'd probably take these canards off because that looks kind of silly to have on a Clubman. It's a little rusty from sitting here for the last couple years, but maybe worth going into it. So depending on how the videos do with the R53 Mini, we might go for the R55 JCW Clubman, N14, so not so totally reliable, but could be a fun build depending on how the videos do on this. We won't really know how the videos do on this R53 Mini until we go in, restore it, drive it, take it to the Dragon, take it to the track, have some fun with this car. And, you know, I don't want you guys to rag on Ben in the comments at all. It's not really Ben's fault here. This is just a unfortunate timing situation. If Ben had just had it one more day, it would have blown up on him instead of me. Again, he had no indication that the car was going to go when I bought it. And so I really, no hate towards Ben from my side. I love Ben. He's one of my closest friends. He has my trailer right now that he's borrowing. It's just, again, one of those very unfortunate timing situations. And how much can we blame Ben? He took $500 off the price. So, and now I've got a blown up Mini Cooper. But, you know, either way, it still makes for some interesting content. Let me know what you guys think I should do in the comments below. I know you will. I'm going to be reading them over the next few days before I make a determining decision on, do we junk this? Do we put a junkyard motor in it? Do we do Chris's engine that he's got here that I think is the right choice? Or do we do a fully race prepped motor, which I'm not prepared to do? So I think that's out of the question. I just want to be driving this thing. I want to hear supercharger whine at almost 7,000 RPM. I want to do a front wheel drive burnout, and I want to do laps in this thing non-stop. Thanks for watching. Kind of a disaster. See you on another one again soon. Bye-bye.